NIP losing double overtime games to Damwon. Na'Vi not winning a single match. Dark Zero getting COVID, BDS and Empire playing the best damn game of console ever, Team 1's Cinderella story to win it all. None of that matters because I have my freaking laptop!
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Wait,
thank you very
wait,
much,
you're
Predator.
getting one?
If you want to see the full segment of how I got this, you can find it over here. And it is the best damn storyline of the whole major, and I will not be told otherwise. I fought for this for 11 months. It's the longest storyline of the whole event. Look, it even does this. Are you not entertained? I'll just put this aside for a sec. Ugh. The Six Mexico Major wrapped up just last weekend, seeing Team 1 scrape and claw their way through their group, force a tiebreaker match, win said tiebreaker, then go through Liquid and Empire to claim 200 grand and enough global standings points to make it to next year's Six Invitational. We're going to talk about them, how insane their journey's been, and how every other team did in this tournament, both good and bad. But before we do, I'm sorry for not getting this video out any sooner. I obviously needed to focus on the Mexico analyst desk, which I hope you guys enjoyed, by the way. But coming back from Mexico, I was pretty sick and just needed a couple of days to recover from the whole experience. And it was an experience. It was a huge honor to be selected for the talent team that went to the Mexico Major. I'm obviously hoping that I did you guys proud, but please let me know how I did or if you have any legitimate criticisms. I would love to hear both the good and the bad. But enough about me. Let's talk about groups. I might have broken something. Group A did end up being the hardest one to call. Group B was pretty lackluster and not that interesting. Group C was the one that completely flipped the script on most people's expectations. And Group D still maintained its group of death status, even though TSM didn't do anything. There are asterisks that you can put all over this event. Knights not being able to go, TSM not being able to play with Merc because of COVID, Dark Zero getting COVID at the venue and needing to play a playoff game from their hotel room, the roof almost falling in on us. That's a joke, by the way. Add whatever caveats you want. This event was better than SI 2021 full stop. Best showing APAC has ever had at an international tournament despite being one team down compared to every other region. The world champs rage quitting and getting upset, fire and flames on stage between teams, couple of barn burner maps, and obviously Team 1's unlikely rise to the top of the tournament. This entire event slapped. Let's get into the teams real quick from bottom to top, beginning with 13th through 15th. TSM being down here isn't really a surprise given that they had to play a man down due to Merc's positive COVID test before the event. Their answer to this problem seemed to be putting Pojo Man on Merc's roles and trying to play around it, but it just wasn't the same. If TSM had had more advanced warning, maybe they could have shifted even more things around, like people were theorizing Chala Bolo on entry, Geo on flex, Pojo Man playing support, but they only had 2 days to prep. So there's really nothing that you can do about losing a player that's that important with so little time to prepare. The Sonics being this low also isn't really a shock. They were in probably the hardest group, didn't change their map pool up very much, and got schooled on maps we've seen them play a lot in the NAL by teams who just did it way better. Yeti's choice of sign language notwithstanding, there really wasn't much fire coming from SQ in Mexico. I can give them a very slight pass for not having as much LAN experience going into the event, which was kind of a big talking point for most people anyway, but hopefully they can learn a lot from what they did wrong in Stage 3. And G2 also joins NA at the bottom. I think I definitely overrated what these guys could do so early after roster changes. I will fully admit that. Day 1 of groups, they were yelling at one another a lot. Day 2 kind of seemed like they got their act together a little bit more, but by the time they were knocked out, the only team they beat was NIP. Twice. They beat the world champs the same amount of times Damwon beat G2. Like, there might be some confusion that this roster really needs to sort out for next stage. 9th through 12th, we can't not talk about NIP first. Monty and I did a press conference with a couple of teams beforehand, NIP included, and they talked a lot how about they really wanted to kick off their dynasty and had a lot of confidence. That's not how you do it. 2 games against Damwon, back to back, both on Clubhouse, exact same bans, both went to overtime. And you lose both? Losing the first one kind of makes sense because Damwon were keeping things really close the entire game all the way up until they finally took the lead in overtime. But they were up 6-2 in the second game. NIP, they were trying to end it early. And then they just left the server. Damwon won 6 rounds straight against NIP in that second game to win. They doused the world champions in lighter fluid, and then G2 struck a match the next day and burned them to hell. That has to be the single most embarrassing performance of any world champion team in Rainbow Six ever. Talk a big game about wanting a G2 level dynasty one day and then forget how to play Rainbow Six for 2 days straight during groups. Really did a good job convincing me you deserve to stay at the top. What a joke. Hang on. Okay, I've calmed down. Cyclops were super close to getting out of groups, but fought to the death against Team 1 at the bitter end and just couldn't pull it out. They only had to win one round, man. Like, if that game ends 7-3, the Japanese would have been going to the playoffs. Instead, they play a tiebreaker game and just get run over. Like, it is what it is. Still a very solid performance from them, though. There was already very noticeable improvement from their play at the 6 Invitational, and they played in a super competitive group and got decent results. So they're going to be looking pretty scary heading to 8-Pack North, I think. Invictus also looked pretty impressive, or showed steady improvement through the first 2 days. There was an opportunity for them to survive their group of death, but then they met Empire and Liquid on the last day and only won 3 rounds total. Yike. But from moving Joe onto the team only just recently, getting to Mexico in the first place, and even being in contention at one point to get out of the group of death is still better than their SI performance overall. So let's see if they can keep this trend going. And Na'Vi didn't win a single game. They only had 2 opponents to prep for, and the best that they could do was 2 overtime losses against Furia. They honestly suffered the most, I think, from having one less team in their group. With the way that the whole format worked out, it meant that there were less opportunities for them to get out of the hole that they had dug themselves and maybe claw their way back into playoff contention. Like, I will grant them that much, but the fact that they were even in that hole in the first place is still a problem. What they presented in Mexico is extremely lackluster given people's expectations. Now, 5th through 8th, the teams that got knocked out in the quarterfinals. And this is where NA's hopes both went to die. And I did too. Space Station looked fine in groups, like pretty normal what we saw from them in stage 2, only lost 1 game and it was in overtime. Then they got into a best of 3 format for 2 maps against Empire and only showed up for 1 of the 4 halves played. Not great. It's disappointing, but I will stand by this assertion. The NAL is a really weak league right now compared to EUL or BR6. Lots of teams there are still looking for direction. SSG stomped NAL teams in stage 2, then played internationally and just didn't seem like they stacked up to the hype. Aside from that Empire game against Na'Vi and Furia in groups, they seemed like they were relatively the same team that we expected from their performance in stage 2, but I think they just need maybe more time to hammer their ideas home and get actual international standing back. And pray that the rest of NA gets better so they really have teams to test their mettle against, because right now we're kind of in shambles. Dark Zero was a shocker. First place in Group C when I didn't think they'd make it out. Systematically playing their brand of formulaic siege to a T. Didn't lose a single map in regulation. Then 2 players tested positive, they couldn't play their playoff game on stage, and they went out with a whimper. First thing, get vaccinated. I don't know why some of you keep putting this off. And second thing, I thought the rule was that if 1 player tested positive, the coach would come and step in. But if 2 players tested positive, then the whole team would get DQ'd. So props to UB and to Face It for still letting them play the game from their rooms, even though they couldn't win it. The sad thing is, as cool as this was for Dark Zero, I don't expect that their roster for stage 3 will be the same as it was in Mexico. So we won't see this exact same roster do anything else significant again. What they had in Mexico was it. So hopefully stage 3 is better. Furia was pretty uninteresting in groups. They did better than Na'Vi, but that's not really saying that much. Most of their games went to OT. Then they went to playoffs and did the exact same thing against BDS, but they just couldn't win. And one of those games included BDS coming back, by the way. The only takeaway I have from Furia is they just need to do a better job closing maps than they did in Mexico. They made it way further than I anticipated, but still, that's not really saying much given the group that they were in, because Group B wasn't exactly hyper competitive. And last in the quarterfinals, Damwon Kia! Sorry, I had to. Monty said it best. These guys have grit. Both games against NIP were fantastic for different reasons. One of them was going round for round, blow for blow with another aggressive team. The other was keeping calm and bringing an unlikely comeback out of their asses at the end. They also beat G2 twice in regulation and almost took a map off of Team Liquid in their quarterfinal game. This technically makes them the best Korean team that has ever played Siege based on how far they were able to get at a major event. So hats off to them. but they need to figure out how to work with Rin on this team. That final map against Liquid just seemed like pure desperation, but it's definitely a good sign of things to come for these guys moving forward. Semi-finalists, 3rd and 4th place. The two teams I really wish could have played the grand final against one another, both of which disappointed me. Let's start with Liquid. It felt like the only thing standing in Liquid's way in Mexico was themselves. NIP was out in groups, they had a super easy playoff bracket, or so it seemed. They almost went undefeated in the group of death. Like, the one match they lost was one they memed in a throwaway game against TSM that didn't matter. But they won all of the games that did. Quarterfinal, no problem. Semifinal against Team 1, they could have ended in 2 maps. But they let Coastline get away from them and then got 7-0'd on Consulate. That is 2 straight events where Consulate has been the map that's completely gotten away from them and lost them the event. I'm not saying it's all the map's fault, but how do you explain getting 7-0 after winning it twice against Empire in groups? There's not really an easy out for Liquid in this case. And the other semifinalist is BDS. Now, I know what some of you are probably already going to argue. BDS only lost by 1 round in overtime. Surely it's not a big deal. Yeah, they lost in a toss-up, because that's what happens when games go to round 15. I understand that. But that 1 round they lost could have gone way differently if they didn't get unnecessarily aggressive, and it's not the only time BDS needed a late comeback to potentially win a map. Same thing happened in playoffs, same thing happened in groups. Yes, they are still a really good team, but I will stand by what I said in the Storylines video. BDS needed to win something big or people were going to stop giving them grace. Losing 1 round might be forgivable to some people, sure, but when it's an elimination round that was only possible because you dragged yourself out of a deep hole from earlier in the map, it looks like BDS weren't performing at 100% at this event anyway. They were close, but winning requires a lot more than what they showed. 2nd place. The winners of the Raleigh Major tried defending their 2-year standing as defending major champions and fell just short. Team Empire. The part of me that isn't an Empire fan is pretty happy about this, but let's be honest, everything was going their way. 2nd place in the group of death was almost guaranteed for Empire when it was proven TSM weren't playing at full strength. So Empire lock up 2nd place. Then they make SSG look like fools in the quarterfinals, go toe-to-toe with their EUL rivals in BDS in the semifinals, and look really good despite almost losing in overtime. And then the finals come around. They win their map pick, lose their opponent's map pick, not really a big deal, then lose their own map pick in overtime. Picking Consulate against a Brazilian team was going to be risky anyway, but I will argue that if they had just won 2 rounds in overtime, if they win Coastline, then they would have gone and schooled Team 1 on Consulate like they did in Map 4 and won the whole series 3-1, like I predicted, by the way. Their game plan was locked in. They played Siege exactly how they wanted to play Siege, but letting things go to a Map 5 was very clearly where problems lay. Empire, usually a pretty good closing team, but Coastline ended up being a difference maker even if most people don't see it. You win that, you win the series. They didn't. And they have to live with that mistake forever. And the Cinderella story. The unlikely underdogs, the ever-doubted opportunists, the team that made history by forcing a tiebreaker game and then going on to win the entire major. Team 1. How many people had that in their bingo cards? I thought they'd get 2nd in their group. I didn't foresee Group A being nearly as competitive as it was, but them needing a 7-2 victory, a 7-2 win against Cyclops to force a tiebreaker against Cyclops looked like it was going to be impossible. But they got their 7-2. Then they won the tiebreaker. Then they beat Dark Zero and Liquid in playoffs. Then there was no stopping them. It's one thing to make history and force that tiebreaker game. We've never had one of those in Siege ever until Mexico. It's another thing to win said tiebreaker match. It's a completely different ball game to then go on and win the entire event. It's simply the perfect storm. This team was built from the remnants of the insane Brazilian shuffle back in February, the scraps left behind by teams that didn't want to pick these guys up. And 6 months later, they just won 200 grand, and now they're going to Montreal next year. They're not the perfect team. They're not the flashiest. Hell, I'd even argue this might be the only really important tournament any of these guys win in their careers ever. But they did it, and nothing can take that away from them. So, I'll say it again. Congratulations to your 6 Mexico Major champions, team won. That's all from me. I could bore you with a whole bunch of stories from Mexico, but I already did that. It's an AMA stream sitting on my Twitch channel if you want to go watch it. And it's now time that we get back into a normal content groove again. So please, hit up my Twitter, my Twitch, and this YouTube channel for more in the coming days. Please and thank you. And I hope that you enjoyed the analyst desk from the 6 Mexico Major. I'll see you later. Penis. That's how I end these, right?